Hello, and welcome to the Muses Lab, your destination for all things pleasure as it relates to our human experience, relationships, spirituality, and sexuality. I invite you to join me on this adventure of discovery and hope what you receive inspires you to become the muse of your life's journey. So, without further ado, let's explore. Hello, and welcome to the Say It With Sex podcast. It's your girl, Siobhan L. And this is probably like the third time I tried to do this episode because I originally started doing an episode talking about spiritual language, upgrades, and all that other stuff. And I'm more than likely going to circle back to that, but that just wasn't where my energy is today. Is not where my energy is today. For the last maybe a couple of weeks for me, I have been, or story story words, thoughts, ideas have been looming in my head about reclaiming my sexy, and all I can hear in my head is that damn bringing sexy back. I could just hear the song playing in the background as like soundtrack music. But it's definitely not about bringing sexy back, but it's reclaiming my sexiness. I have felt disconnected from that aspect from of myself, and in the last Q&A Tuesday that I did, or really the first Q&A Tuesday that I did, I talked about the prompt that got me into reclaiming, I guess, or getting into my sensuality, my sexuality. And I was so deep. I was so deep in my sensual bag for years. And, when I transitioned into the Muses Lab from the original name of my brand, which was Say It With Sex, I lost part of myself. Like I dialed and turned that part of myself down. And now I'm in a space where I'm desiring to be that person again, and not exactly who she was 3 years ago, but an updated version of myself as a sensual sexual being. I'm craving that aspect of myself again. And what I can say, and most people know this already, but if you hadn't connected the dots together, when you are in a space of survival, when you are in a fight or flight mode, when you have experienced some form of trauma or something that has shifted how you view the world, how you experience the world, your mindset about the world, that part of you shuts off because we have not been taught to view our sensuality and our sexuality, one, as an equal part of who we are, but also as a space within the makeup of who we are that needs to be prioritized. So the first thing to go when we are in fight or flight is our sensuality and our sexuality. And I'm using sensuality in a broad space. So not the touching, feeling, sensing, thinking, sexual pleasure type of sensuality. Also, our senses. Sensuality is the experience of our senses, right? So, you know, maybe a few of our senses work when we're in flight or fight mode, when we're in survival mode. We're trying to overcome an obstacle or a barrier, or we're in a storm, we're going through something, and we're trying to keep our head above water. Certain senses may activate to help guide us through that experience that we're having, but all of our senses are not fully activated and in alignment and in unison. So those parts of ourselves take a back seat. And I can talk about how to get back into your body, right? Because I follow a lot of somatic practitioners, movement artists, holistic healers. Like I follow a lot, and I'm in communion with a lot, and I'm in friendship with a lot of people who give us ways to get back into the body and to ground. So I can tell you movement is one of the ways. It's probably the most accessible way that you can attune to the sensuality and the sexuality in your body, right? I can say that, however, if your mind is not in a space, though it might be craving it, if your mind is not in a space to actively pursue, I felt that myself. If your mind is not in a space to actively pursue sensuality, sexuality through movement, despite how much you may be craving it, you're just not going to do it. And I'm definitely going to speak from a neurospicy perspective because I feel like those things uh, matter, right? And it may bring some perspective because while I don't think everybody is neurodivergent, there may be some symptoms, particularly ADHD symptoms, I should say, that most of you experience despite not actually having ADHD. Like there's some symptoms that intersect across persons who are considered neurotypical and those of us who are neurospicy, right? Cool. So if your mind is not trying to actively pursue it despite how much you crave it, it's just not it's not going to happen, right? Particularly for me as someone with ADHD, i have I have to see. I'm a visual learner. I process things visually. So if I don't see how, whether it's through my mind's eye see or physically through my four eyes see, how to incorporate things like movement and other holistic and somatic practices into my day, if I can't visualize how this works for me for my day, thinking about all of the other active things and administrative things that I need to do to transition myself out of survival mode, if I can't see how to incorporate things like movement into my into my day, into my daily activities, it's not going to happen because I have to make it make sense in my mind before I can make it a passive in my mind decision and then an active decision and execution to do it. So if I can't make sense of it, it's not going to happen. And I believe that many of us are disconnected from our sensuality and our sexuality due to things like being in survival mode or experiencing a specific type of trauma. We are disconnected from it because we can't actually visualize how to incorporate it into our lives, into our schedule. I don't know how to fit this into my schedule. Like it looks good, it looks great. I feel drawn to it, I feel called to it, but I can't make sense of how this fits into my day because I have all these other things that are centered around my survival in order that for me to do in order for me to pull myself out of survival, right? I want to get my head not just above water, I want to actually get to shore so I can breathe, right? So I can thrive. So because we're not taught those things, incorporating it or actively pursuing it becomes a challenge, right? Here's the other thing. I'm going to do that other podcast. But in that podcast, I talk about, or in that episode I should say, I talk about rich and poor being a mindset, right? So there's on earth there are energy currents that happen that is just the general makeup of earth, right? You have dualities, multiplicities, binaries, slippery slopes, mirror reflections, and within those, and amongst other things, and within that uh, energetic current, there's a binary, or I wouldn't say this is a binary. I would say this is more of a duality, right? So you have rich and poor, two opposite ends of the spectrum. So you have polar opposites, rich and poor, but then you have spectrum, right? So within the spectrum of rich or poor, you have two ways. You have multiple ways, but there are two, I say, core ways that you can experience wealth, richness, wealth, whether it's monetary or not, and lack or poverty or poorness, right? This can either happen in a monetary way, or this could happen in mindset community way, right? Well, I just did three. So you got mindset, community, and monetary, right? So three ways that you can experience the spectrum of rich and poor, right? There may be someone who's monetarily rich but poor in mindset or poor in community or even poor in love, right? Somebody might be poor monetarily but maybe rich in love, rich in community, rich, in mindset, right? Cool. It's the same thing with sensuality and sexuality, right? It's a mindset. So if your mind has not been trained or been exposed to the thought of embodying sexiness, right? Because we feel sexy, right? But we feel sexy because our mind believes that we are sexy, and then we embody what that look and feels like for us. We visually see sexy, but through the visual component of it, we feel what the energy of sexiness that person is giving. And that's how we then start to connect the dots in our bodies between our mind, our feelings and emotions, etc., etc. But sexiness starts in the mind. Same with movement, right? Or somatic practice. If our mindset is not geared to adapting to a movement practice so that the outcome is then we begin to reconnect to our body and start to feel sexy and sensual again, there's going to constantly be a disconnect. There's no bridge to replace the gap. There are many things that are being that are being given to me at this moment, right? Here's the other thing. I seen a post by Just Human, based out in Detroit, uh, cannabis baddie, and in the reel that they did, they talked about, or they noted in the caption, uh, they just become unemployed, and instead of looking for a job, they've been going to the gym. And I responded saying, if I had the energy, what I should have said was, if I had the mindset to go to the gym when I quit my job, when I transitioned out of my job 4 months ago, I would be a totally different person. Here's why mindset makes a difference. If it has not become a habit in your mind to preserve yourself, trying to incorporate that or shift or we rewire your brain to do so is going to be a difficult task. And you have a lot of practitioners, coaches, gurus, however they call themselves, that say, "Oh, you could just do it. These are five simple these are five simple steps to get you moving." Baby, if my mind ain't thought about fucking moving and I sit in a sedentary space, I'm at my laptop trying to create things, look for things, do administrative productivity. If my mindset has never been in a habit of incorporating movement into my daily life, these five simple steps are not going to help me. Because I may implement them. I may have the skill and the gift of execution, because I think execution is a gift, particularly being someone who has challenges with execution. So those with the gift of execution may be able to mimic those steps, right? We can mimic things, but mimicking only lasts for so long because it's temporary, because there's no foundation. I can mimic something, but because I don't have a foundation, I can't sustain mimicking. it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable action. And the reason why it's not sustainable is because it's not rooted in anything. So your steps are great to get people to get back moving, adapt some sort of practice to help them and have them feel sexy again. These steps are great, but it starts with the mind. And most people won't tell you that in like an Instagram post or a TikTok post. You got to pay them thousands of dollars for you to tell you that it starts in the mind first, which I think is bullshit, but that's just me. It starts in the mind. So if your mindset is not focused on, it is in my best interest to incorporate these practices into my daily schedule, or in order for me to embody the thing that I crave, my mind and my heart, because craving is in the body, right? It's either in your heart or it's in your gut or it's in your vagina. So it's either, so we have our heart area, our gut, or solar plexus area if you're a person who follows the chakras, and then your loins, your genitals, or your sacral parts, your sacral chakra. Again, if you follow the chakras, so your heart, your gut, and your privates are where you're going to feel cravings, right? Things that you need to satiate. It's a straight line, right? Which is so interesting, from the heart to your loins to what's betwixt your thighs. There's a straight pathway to craving and satiating, right? So matters of the heart can tend to be sex if we're looking at it from that perspective. Or there's a hunger for sex because right above your privates is your belly. That's your space of hunger, digestion, even creativity. Your emotions sit in your gut. Gut is considered to be the second brain. So that's another episode within itself. But when you think about it like that, if the mind from your heart to your privates are not in alignment, it doesn't matter. And I recognize that some of my favorite movement practitioners, even when they're experiencing spaces of grief, trauma, disconnect, depression, anxiety, it's easy for them to get into, well, not easier than most, right? Because that still is not that easy, right? It's not like it's not like they wake up and they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna move. It's steps, right? However, when it is something that you do, when exercise is something that you do because it is part of your daily activity, like it's a lifestyle, right? Anything that is a habit that you do, it becomes your lifestyle. It's part of your daily activities. It's scheduled in your calendar, and your other activities, other external activities, are centered around that because it is part of your life, is part of who you are, right? It's the core of how you navigate your human experience. So when those things become habit, challenging as it may be, it is easier than most to take steps to build a bridge back to this practice. But when you have centered your life around productivity, when you have centered your life around work, when trying to incorporate activities that require some form of rest and restoration for the body, that requires an active, not movement, but it requires some semblance of activity with the body, where you're prioritizing your body. If that has never been your life, that's never been your lifestyle, now telling someone the gateway to the sensuality and the sexuality, the levels that they crave, is through this restoration practice, is through this movement practice, is through this form of rest, this level of rest. That is a hard bridge to cross. And the 5 simple steps that you put in a social media post is not going to cut it, because it all begins in the mind. We have to not just see ourselves as the thing we want to embody, we also have to see ourselves doing the actions, the steps that it takes to get to whom we are trying to embody. It's mindset. And without mindset, it makes all of this, it makes it all challenging. Mindset is the key. It's the key to everything. It's the key to manifestation. It's the key to your desired reality. It's the key to seeing yourself as a creative, as an influencer, as uh, a, someone with a title in corporate America. You have to actually visualize it in your mind first before you can even take steps to embody it. So for those of us, those of you like me, who have been desiring and craving to reconnect with your sexuality, our mind isn't there. You know, when you got shit happening, the the gap between you and that part of yourself continues to widen. Like, how do I even see myself? Like, I look at old videos, things that I've posted on the gram and pictures, and I'm like, damn, where's that girl? I want to reconnect with her. I want to see her again. I want to be her or be like her in this version of who I am now, because I was in like my 30s when I was doing that. Like late 30s, but still I was in my 30s, and now I'm an almost 43-year-old woman. And I have to now redefine what sexy looks like for me in my 40s. It doesn't look like the person I found in my late 30s, my mid to late 30s. It don't look like that person. Because that person was like, I am pro ho and I am sovereign in my sexuality, and y'all gonna get all this belly and titty. And like, there was a free, a liberated version of myself. And not to say that I'm not liberated, but there is a part of me who is still, now I don't want to say seeking, because I just looked at this. I just saw a clip of this interview today, and a young woman was like, the feminine doesn't seek. And I'm like, but what does that even mean? Like, I still have to sit with that. I'm in pursuit. I'm in pursuit of softness and what that looks like for me. And because I'm in pursuit of softness, how I express, I think we're about to solve our problems. How I express my sexuality is not as loud as it was when I came into it, right? I feel like my sexual expression uh is taking baby steps, right? When I reclaimed my sexiness had this 20-year-old feel. Me against the world. I can take on the world, right? And now my sexiness is coming into a more mature space. And there may be a part of me who still wants to shout it from the rooftop, but maybe I'm not shouting it from the rooftop. Maybe it's a small, intimate rooftop party. And people are experiencing my sexuality in this small rooftop party that is invite only. So I'm actively redefining what sexy looks like for me in relation to the softness that I am in pursuit of, while also reclaiming my voice in many ways and discovering what that looks like for me. And that's my speaking voice, that's my physical expression, and that's also my writing voice. So, all of these things are actively happening at once. And I want to dive in, but there's a pause. It's not so much a hesitancy, there's a pause, because as much as I want to feel sexy again, I want to be sure that I'm intentional with how I'm bringing in sexual energy outside of me being a creative. I want to be intentional with how I'm bringing sexual energy back into my atmosphere because I want it to magnetize uh, energy that is aligned with me, that is in attuned with me. But I also want to be aware of sexual energy that seems like it doesn't mean me harm, but it does. So these are just my inside thoughts out loud. I do not want to belabor the topic, but I do want to leave us with some things to consider, some seeds to consider, that you're feeling sexy while it is in the body and it is an embodiment, that your mind, and I mean we've heard people say it's all in your mind, right? I think I want to say it was Henry Ford who said, "Whoever you think you are, you're right." Right. So if you think you're that then yeah, you're correct. It's all in the mind. Everything begins in the mind and how we view ourselves, how we perceive ourselves, how we visualize ourselves. And if you don't perceive, visualize, or see yourself as sexy, then it's not gonna click. So if that is what you are in pursuit of, is that if that is what you are craving, start in the mind first. Yeah. That's my suggestion for us this week. Start in the mind. And even if it's not sexiness, start in the mind. Yeah. Thank you all for tapping into the Muses Lab. And until next time. Thank you for tapping into the Muses Lab. I hope you enjoyed this week's adventure. Be sure to like this episode, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and share the wealth with others. Dive deeper into the lab by joining the Pleasure Frequency list at www.themuseslab.com. Receive weekly musings, early access, and exclusive drops, as well as discounts on products and services. Thank you once again for tapping in. Until next time.